We are in the middle of eclipse season, babes, and I'll be real with you. This partial Virgo solar eclipse on Sunday, September 21st is pretty spooky. It looks objectively uncomfortable. But you know what? We're here to guide each other through it. You know me, I'm Whitney Kranz, your mystic sis, your astro bestie, and it's my God's given duty to translate the otherworldly wisdom of the cosmos into down-to-earth insights that help us take action on our goals. And this place, the House of Good Spirit podcast, is where we gather together to talk about our hopes, our dreams, and our wishes for the future as they reflect with each lunation, both our full moons and our new moons. Before we dive into the show, what this partial solar eclipse means for us, I want to give a quick shout out to Subpar Astrologer here on YouTube, who left an excellent question about the anaretic degree on our first Virgo new moon episode. That was the new moon that occurred back in August on the 23rd at 0 degrees Virgo. Subpar Astrologer writes, "Thank you for this lovely episode to wake up to. I found you through Nightlight." Shout out Nightlight peeps. I had a question I wonder if you'd give your perspective on, somewhat related to the 29-degree Virgo eclipse. I have the North Node at 29 Virgo, and I've considered, due to the node's retrograde motion, that it might be considered the first degree rather than the last. Do you think there's more to that question, or is the 29 anaretic degree symbolic of finality, regardless of the motion of the planetary body? Well, first of all, you are certainly not a subpar astrologer with questions like that. That is so astute. For our more beginners in the house here, the 29th degree of any sign is called the anaretic degree and holds a lot more weight and symbolism than many other degrees. Now, the quick answer to this question is absolutely yes. Retrogrades provide a lot of nuance into how we interpret the anaretic degree. And so I think your question, subpar astrologer, is totally valid because the nodes always move in retrograde motion. Sure, we could think of it as the first degree, but not so blatantly. There's a thing that happens as astrology students. We learn all of the technicalities. We memorize all of the things. And then what happens when you start practicing? You start sort of bending those rules. You start looking at the chart with a softer focus that helps to bring those true divinatory reflections through. And so my answer to that question is I don't think the nodes placed at 29 degrees of any sign hold the same weight or significance as a direct planet at that degree. I would still reflect with any planet or point. A node is a point, not an actual body within the sky. I would absolutely reflect on themes of transition around anything at both the 29th degree or the first degree. I hope that answers your question. And for all of you out there who are like, what the heck does that even mean? Come on over and book a reading with me and we'll check out all the nuances of the placements in your chart. Now, if you have a burning astrology question, drop it in the comments for us. I love featuring your questions here. And even though we haven't on these last 2 episodes, I still love featuring your voices here. And I invite you to share your own story of how this eclipse season has impacted you personally. Connect with me over on Instagram. Send me a short, about minute-long DM video of your story, and I'll include it here on the next episode. Let's get into the meat of the show, shall we? This lunation, the Virgo Partial Solar Eclipse, takes place on Sunday, September 21st. And it's a lunation that is clearly revealing our existing limitations. Now, eclipses always ask us to surrender control. And while that's absolutely true, we can consciously plan to ensure we have support. And that's what we're doing here with this episode. So if you need personal guidance navigating this eclipse, that's exactly what my readings are for. You can book a reading at the link in the description. So we covered it in our last episode, but for those who are new here and who may be unfamiliar with the astronomy of an eclipse, what is an eclipse? An eclipse occurs technically when the luminaries, the sun or the moon, are within 18 degrees of our nodes. You've probably heard partial eclipses, total eclipses, penumbral eclipses, and all of those have various meanings. What we need to know simply for this episode is that this is a partial eclipse, which means it's taking place, yes, within 18 degrees of the nodes, but greater than 10 to 12 degrees. Unfortunately, that total eclipse signification of 10 to 12 degrees apart from the nodes, really the only way that I know how to discern that is by looking on NASA. So go check out NASA. Another great resource for eclipses for a full list of eclipses in the future is astroseek.com. The important thing to note, unlike the last eclipse just a couple weeks ago that we experienced in Pisces, this eclipse is a south node eclipse. So the lunation is taking place within proximity to the south node. Now, if we talked about the north node in our last episode as representative of this insatiable hunger, the south node is basically opposite that. The south node is a place of intense release, a place of letting go. It can often be a place of escapism. And in Vedic astrology, we use the term moksha. Moksha means a sense of spiritual release that is so great, it takes us out of the body and into spirit. It's a spiritual release. Now, a solar eclipse occurs when, from our vantage point here on Earth, the moon moves in front of the sun. The sun's light is obscured from our view. This is why it is often considered a very spooky, very malefic symbol. And if you've ever seen an eclipse in real life, in April 2024, we had a total solar eclipse in Aries. I did what every astrologer and mysticist says not to do. And I went and hiked out in the woods, found a cozy spot to gaze up at the sky, and I watched that entire eclipse in totality. And let me tell you how spooky that was. What an experience at the middle of the day to watch the entire sky turn to night for 4 minutes. The insects stop insecting, the birds stop chirping, everything goes still. And so how we can translate this symbolism when we think of the astrological effect of an eclipse, it is a disruption to that solar light in our lives. It is a change in those solar themes of ego and identity and direction. Now, if you're newer to astrology, you can think of an eclipse like the universe pulling the emergency brake, pulling over. We're forced to pay attention and reroute our journey. Now, for those astro nerds out there like me, the impact of visibility, of actual visibility in the sky is always really important when we talk about the strength of an eclipse. This particular partial solar eclipse is not visible in many populated areas of the world, but Australia will get this, and also parts of the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans. If you are a mutable rising sign, so you have mutable signs on the angles, your Virgo, Pisces, Gemini, Sagittarius signs will certainly feel a greater pull for this eclipse. And honestly, even if you have planets at very late degrees of mutable signs, very early degrees of cardinal signs, you're going to feel this eclipse as well. So this solar eclipse is taking place in Virgo. I'm not going to rehash all of the details about the Virgo archetype because we did a deep dive 2 episodes ago in our August Virgo 0 degree eclipse episode. If you missed it, go back and rewatch for that full deep dive. But let's just ground ourselves in the archetype so we can talk about the context of the sky for this particular lunation. Now, Virgo is our archetypes of the healer, the hermit in tarot, the alchemist, or the magician. Virgo is an analyst and a purifier. All of this is because Virgo is ruled by Mercury. It's both Mercury's domicile and exaltation. Now, it is also the detriment of Jupiter. If you think about the way Mercury functions, Mercury is all of the tiny pieces and details of what is happening, and Jupiter is our big picture planet. That's why Jupiter doesn't do so well here. Virgo is also the fall of Venus, and we'll talk about that a little bit as we dive into the context of the lunation, because over this period, in fact, just prior to this lunation, Venus enters Virgo. And Virgo is also what we call a feminine or yin earth sign. Again, we can think of all of these qualities as an emphasis on discernment, intentionality, integrity, and a dedication to craft. Like I mentioned, if you're craving more on that Virgo archetype, we really dove deep in the August episode. Go back and watch that. But before we talk about what all of this lunation actually means for us, what does this Virgo partial solar eclipse mean for us? We have to, as always, talk about the context in the sky, because none of this happens in a vacuum. So we gave it away right at the beginning when we talked about our great listener, Subpar Astrologer's comment. Subpar Astrologer, who is not a subpar astrologer. We got to get that down. So the first and most important thing you'll note when looking at the chart of this eclipse is that this eclipse is taking place at exactly the 29th degree of Virgo. In astrology and Hellenistic astrology specifically, this is what we call the anaretic degree. The anaretic degree holds so much symbolism, similar to what we were talking about symbolism with the South Node. There is a sense of release associated with the anaretic degree. Now, that's probably the best and most optimistic way we can frame it, because ancient astrologers, again, viewed this degree as pretty darn malefic. And so words they associated with this 29th degree include things like straight up crisis. Actually, this degree in ancient terms was called the killing degree. Now, do I think that we're all going on a murderous spree under this lunation? Absolutely not. But we can think about it in the way, like I said, of release. What do we have to cut from our lives in order to move forward? That's what's being asked of us over this lunation. Also because the anaretic degree has this fated quality. Why? Because the next step that the planet will make moving in direct motion is moving into the next sign. In order to move into the next space, we face a moment of crisis where we don't want to leave. We're comfortable here, right? And so this fatedness of this degree leads us into how we move forward, how we step into our fate. This is a super Saturn moon. Why is that? This lunation, the solar eclipse, is placed directly across the axis from Saturn. The moon is opposed to Saturn, who is currently retrograde in Pisces. Remember in our last episode, the Pisces eclipse episode, we talked so much about this journey that Saturn has been through over the last year. It spent 2 years in Pisces, and this is where that journey culminates. So again, in order to move forward, we are realizing our limitations, Saturn is limitations, and tying them up in probably not a very nice and neat little bow, but we're tying it up, we're throwing out the baggage so that we can move forward. What I also want to mention briefly about the lunation itself, before we talk just a little bit about what else is going on in the sky, the ruler of this moon is Mercury, and Mercury is in Saturn's bound. So you can see Mercury on the chart is in the very beginning degrees of Libra. Those first few degrees, because Saturn holds its exaltation in Libra, those first few degrees of Libra belong to Saturn. And so even our ruler of this moon is feeling Saturn's weight right now. Now, what we have going for us is that this lunation, you don't see it on the screen here, but it's happening in Mercury's decan. Remember, in this show, we work a lot both with bounds and decans as additional context for the astrology. And the reason why I love decans so much is because they relate directly back to the tarot. The tarot is full of beautiful archetypal imagery that translates so beautifully into astrology. And the minor arcana card that correlates with this particular decan is the 10 of Pentacles. This is a beautiful card. It is a card of legacy. It is a card of a life well lived. And so when we talk about what all this means, we're absolutely going to talk more about this particular decan and how it relates to the themes of legacy that we see here in the context of this solar eclipse. Now, just generally at this point in the year, this point between Virgo and Libra is a time of equal day and night. It is a liminal threshold moment for us. And what happens immediately after this lunation is important to look at, because immediately we have both the sun and the moon ingress into Libra. Now, remember that Venus is here in Virgo. Venus rules Libra. So that's how we weave all of these significations together, is by looking at across the chart at all of our rulers. And Venus in Virgo has impossibly high standards. And so throughout this moment, we may start to feel a little hard on ourselves. And so that's your warning to recognize those behaviors, those thoughts, those emotions as they begin to come up, and temper and ask, is this really mine? Now, what happens when the sun and the moon ingress into Libra is they activate this kite pattern that was first activated in early August when we discussed the Aquarius full moon. So if you want to learn more about that kite pattern, go back to that early August episode. This activation of this kite shows us, again, that what's happening here is divinely fated for change in ourselves and in the collective. What's important to note, because there are certainly aspects of this lunation that are not very comfortable, and in this time period, over this particular cycle, Mars moves into Scorpio, and when Mars moves into Scorpio, it will square Pluto in Aquarius. Over the last year, we've dealt with 3 different Mars-Pluto oppositions, and so we know what this feels like. That Mars-Pluto dynamic is a continuation of a larger story, but it's going to feel really powerful, really frustrating. So this is where we are going to take a deep breath, root into our self-care, and make sure that we're nourishing ourselves during this time. Now, if all of that sounded like astrology soup to you, please forgive me. Don't worry. The bottom line is that right now, the sky is really heavy. It's karmic and it's deeply transitional. But the gift of a transition is that we move out of that feeling. And so let's talk about it then. What are the themes resonant for this lunation? What does our Virgo partial solar eclipse even mean? My first theme has to do with release and surrender. We talked about this earlier, right? This is your great release. The eclipse asks us to let go of what no longer serves us. Again, with the South Node, it is even more so. It is like the sacrificial fire is beckoning us. Will you resist that sacrificial fire because it's hard? No, you won't. You're braver than that. You're stronger than that. You can feed that sacrificial fire. And while we don't have complete control, we never do, we can do things to make sure that we are living within these themes, right? So how can you consciously release during this time? Can you do something as simply as decluttering your home? Can you clean out your closet? Can you say no intentionally during this time to obligations that don't serve you? This is your moment of sacred no. The important thing that I want to ground us in right now is that the opposite of this, the North Node, is this striver, right? It's this goal-oriented go-get. So if we're opposite that, if this eclipse is taking place on the South Node, how can you practice receiving? How can you sit in this uncomfort, in this unknown, and know that it is for a cause? So practice right now at this time receiving instead of striving. With that, don't shoulder your burdens alone. You have support around you. Whether it looks a little bleak or not, reach out to your people, to your support system. That brings me to my next theme. And this theme deals with a lot of what we've talked about of the 29 degree, the anaretic degree, and that is themes of crisis and threshold. We are here standing at the threshold in a moment of fated release in this liminal space as we move from Virgo to Libra. And because of all that context we talked about, right, with the sun moving into Libra, the sun and the moon immediately moving into Libra, with Mars moving into Scorpio, it's not going to feel super good. I can just tell you that. I can see it right now. It brings to mind themes that may relate to mental anguish, right? Sometimes it can be hard to let go. Sometimes, often, it is hard to stand in that liminal space, and we may feel the mental and emotional anguish of this moment in a really overwhelming way. There's something in which this chart is speaking of, if we're not conscious of the moment, if we're not conscious about what thoughts are ourselves and what thoughts are others, it could result in sort of this echo chamber of shame. It's a shame spiral. I hate to say it, you guys. I'm not here to be doom and gloom. I'm Miss Optimistic, but we can't help but see what is happening in the sky. And I guess let me bring a little bit of levity into it. Who out there has seen Matilda? Matilda was one of my favorite movies growing up. And this moment sort of reminds me, you know, the little kid who got caught eating cake. He loved his cake, that chocolate cake, and he dove into it, right? Well, Mrs. Trunchbull, the mean old headmistress, caught this little boy in the act, I don't remember his name, and basically forced this little boy to sit on stage and eat an entire chocolate cake. Now, that is a little bit what this feels like, being forced to be visible while you're not feeling super comfortable with yourself or your own actions, and realizing what that is. But listen, what we know when we stand on the threshold of change is that the only way out is through. So let's move through this moment as we're standing on this place of equal day and night, standing between realms. It's like we have one last task before moving forward. It's our mythic final challenge. You're on the threshold and we're moving through it. Now, if we're talking about that mythic final challenge, we got to talk about fate, right? Fate and legacy. And that brings me to the next theme of what the heck is happening here under this eclipse. And that is that fate is stripped bare right now. Fate is standing obviously in front of us. And so along with that liminality, we know that fate is driving us toward the next great thing for us. When one door closes, another door opens. Like, when all else is stripped away, what legacy remains for us, right? Like, if we're not aligned with our destiny right now, this eclipse is here to redirect us. It's not gentle, but in that way, it's a gift. It is important when we are keenly aware of our limits that we focus on what truly matters. How are we stepping into the future? And if we're not here, what legacy are we leaving? Now, I hinted to it earlier, but that theme is really coming through when we look at the 10 of Pentacles in the tarot again. Remember, this is a positive card. Even though we're experiencing all of this heaviness right now, this is a card of goals realized, of looking forward to legacy. It is a card that requires that, yes, we look forward, but we also reflect on how far we've come, on all of the things we've achieved in order to get here to this spot. As we're reflecting, we're listening to our own inner guidance, right? We are, and this is my last theme, we are listening for the daimon. We are listening for our own inner guidance. What is a daimon, you ask? A daimon is like our soul. It's our inner guide. If you are an astrology pro, you might equate in a chart the daimon to the lot of spirit. The daimon pushes us forward on our path. Because this eclipse is clearing the path for us, it is clearing the path toward our true calling. Even though the daimon's voice may be a little muted right now, the daimon's voice will return, and it will return loudly and stronger. And so let's now tap into our daimon, our inner guide. As things go dark and we have one foot between realms, gosh, it's like the Hermes imagery that we've been talking at length about over the last couple of episodes, right? It's Hermes as the psychopomp. Where can your spirit travel now? And how is your soul dictating that? Like, what if your daimon lived outside of the body? How would you treat it differently? How would you listen to it and answer it differently? Did you all watch or read. It was originally a book series. I read them back in, I don't know, 8th grade. The His Dark Materials series, that really resonates here. The first book was called The Golden Compass. Maybe that rings more true. Oh my gosh, it was so good. Now, if you remember, the main character in His Dark Materials is this girl, Lyra. And in this mythic world where His Dark Materials takes place, everybody has their daimon, and it's almost like a pet or a familiar that travels with them in all moments. So I think about that, because what if your daimon was a living, breathing thing that traveled with you? It's interesting because in that series, the bad guys are basically severing these kids from their daimons, and the kids shrivel up. They have nothing left. They have nothing left without their daimon. So even though our daimon, because daimon is a solar figure and it is being obscured by the moon, obscured by circumstance and fortune right now, we want to tune in greater to our daimon and understand where our true nature, where fate is leading us. So now that we've discussed fully what this lunation means for us, you know it is so important in my astrology practice that we reflect and we integrate. So as usual, I have several journal prompts for you. Let's talk about these as they relate to our broad themes. What am I ready to release that no longer supports my growth? What burden am I carrying alone that could be shared or set down? How do I want to be remembered? What legacy am I building now? And finally, where is my daimon trying to lead me? Where do I need to tune into its voice? Now, in terms of integrations, actions we can take at this time, it's eclipse season. So I don't want you to do a lot. I don't want you to do any elaborate rituals. I want you to rest. I want you to keep your calendar clear. Say no to your draining obligations, the shit you don't want to do. Just don't do it, okay? Here's your permission, not that you need it from me. Now, this is Virgo, and Virgo reads the waist, the digestive system. And so I think something we can do to move through this moment with as most agency as we can, with a little more comfort, fuel your body well. Eat clean whole foods right now and avoid the things that set you off. I'm a Virgo moon, so I have lots of triggers. There will be no legumes being consumed during this time. Now, we can also, like I mentioned, offer symbolic release at this time. Clean your closet. You know what? Make a donation to a cause you believe in and that aligns with your future, that aligns with the legacy that you want to leave. I think that will be really, really powerful. And just general decluttering, like I mentioned, is going to serve you well, right? Clean, comfortable spaces allow for clean, comfortable minds, right? Speaking of clean, how are we dressing under this eclipse? Yes, it is that time in the show for Astro Style. Now, Virgo is totally the clean girl aesthetic that is trending right now. So go all in on your crisp white shirts, sleek hair pulled back in a bun. Go review, like I've said for the 5th time, you guys, today, sorry. Go review our Virgo New Moon episode for the complete details. But I'll just review. We're doing natural materials, understated elegance that really embodies Virgo, simplicity, intention, function. But this is an eclipse, right? So we have even more permission to go moody with it. Bring in your blacks and your grays. I think a hat is great for this time. A hat will help protect you from the energies. That's also a tip. A hat really helps with sort of psychically porous energy, which is really prominent during an eclipse. So now that we know how we are moving forward and integrating, I want you to remember I created a special affirmation here for this eclipse. We are in the great release. We are letting go of what no longer serves. We are standing at the threshold between what was and what is yet to come. We face fate stripped bare, reminded of what truly matters, of the legacy we're building. And we are listening for our daimon, trusting that inner voice to guide us forward, even in the silence. This eclipse is not punishment. It's a cosmic reset. It's a clearing of the path so that your next steps align with your deepest truth. Now, if today's episode resonated with you, share it with someone who could use some eclipse support. And leave me a comment with what you are intentionally releasing this eclipse season. I invite you, like I mentioned earlier, if you need extra support during this time, I am your Astro bestie. Book a reading for personal support. If you like this style, if you like this symbolic, mythic, archetypal storytelling combined with concrete reflections and integrations, that's exactly what I do in my practice, Astro Arcana. Now remember, don't be a stranger. Please stay connected with me and connect on Instagram specifically if you have juicy eclipse stories to tell. I am wishing you the best as we practice letting go, stepping forward, remembering what matters, and trusting our inner guide during this eclipse. We'll see you next time on the House of Good Spirit.